The moment I saw my prize-winning tomatoes missing, I knew something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just a case of a few stray rabbits or some birds getting lucky. No, someone had been helping themselves to my farm like it was their personal grocery store. My heart pounded as I stared at the empty vines where rows of ripe, red tomatoes had been just yesterday. It wasn't just tomatoes either. Cucumbers, zucchini, and even my best bell peppers were disappearing like magic. But this wasn't magic. This was theft. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I'd miscounted, maybe the farmhands had taken some home, maybe I had just imagined harvesting more than I did. But night after night, more vegetables went missing, and I was left standing in the middle of my farm, fists clenched, trying to understand how I was getting robbed under my own nose. The worst part? There were no signs of forced entry. No broken fences, no footprints, nothing. It was as if the vegetables had simply walked away. So I did what any farmer with a growing grudge and a touch of paranoia would do. I installed a motion sensor camera. It wasn't much, just a little setup near the vegetable patches, but I was desperate to catch this sneaky thief. And catch them I did. What I saw the next morning nearly made me choke on my coffee. There she was, Karen. I paused the footage, zooming in just to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me. But there was no mistake. Karen, my entitled, nosy, always complaining neighbor, was sneaking into my farm in the dead of night, plastic bags in hand, stuffing them full of my vegetables like she was on a game show where the prize was free food. She wasn't even in a hurry. She strolled along, inspecting each vegetable like she was shopping at a farmer's market, occasionally discarding a pepper or two if it wasn't up to her high standards. I felt a mix of emotions: rage, disbelief, amusement. Karen was the last person I would have expected. Not because she was honest, but because she was always acting like she was too good for farm food. She had openly mocked my work in the past, claiming that she only bought organic from high-end grocery stores, yet here she was, elbow-deep in my crops, treating my farm like her personal Whole Foods. I sat back, gripping my coffee cup so hard I thought it might shatter. What was I supposed to do? March over there and demand my vegetables back? Call the police? The thought of explaining to an officer that my neighbor was waging a one-woman vegetable heist seemed absurd. But I couldn't let this slide. Karen had been a thorn in my side for years, complaining about my rooster crowing too early, nagging about the smell of manure, and even trying to get my farm shut down because she thought it ruined the neighborhood's aesthetic. And now she had the audacity to steal from me? Oh no. This wouldn't end with a simple confrontation. If Karen wanted free vegetables so badly, I'd give them to her. But I'd make sure she'd never steal from me again. The idea struck me like a bolt of lightning. I leaned forward, a wicked grin spreading across my face. If she wanted vegetables, she'd get them. But this time, they wouldn't be just any vegetables. No, I was about to introduce her to something truly unforgettable. Ghost peppers. I wasted no time. I went out and bought the spiciest peppers I could find: Carolina Reapers, ghost peppers, and Trinidad scorpions. I planted them right where my bell peppers had been, making sure they looked identical to the ones Karen had been so fond of stealing. I tended to them with extra care, watching them grow into fiery little weapons of vengeance. The waiting was the hardest part. Every night I checked my camera, hoping to catch her in the act again. And then, just as I knew she would, Karen returned. The footage showed her moving through the rows, once again helping herself to my crops, blissfully unaware that she was about to have the worst meal of her life. I could barely contain my excitement the next morning. I watched her from across the street as she carried a large grocery bag into her house, no doubt preparing to make some extravagant meal using her stolen goods. I could only imagine the moment she took that first bite. Hours passed, and I nearly gave up on witnessing the fallout in person. But then, right when I was about to head inside, I heard it. A scream. A long, agonizing, gut-wrenching scream that echoed through the entire neighborhood. I turned, watching as Karen burst out of her house, face red as a tomato, mouth hanging open like she was trying to suck in every ounce of air available. She stumbled across her lawn, waving her hands in the air, before running straight for her garden hose and spraying herself in the face. The sight was so ridiculous that I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. She gasped, choked, and then ran back inside, only to reappear seconds later with a gallon of milk, which she practically inhaled. The milk did little to help. She threw the empty jug to the ground, her eyes wild, her mouth still clearly on fire. Then, as if she suddenly realized what had happened, she turned her gaze toward my farm. Our eyes met from across the street. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The realization hit her like a freight train. She knew. Her expression twisted into pure fury. She stomped toward my house, face still flushed, hair a mess, sweat dripping down her temples. I stood my ground, arms crossed, waiting. "You!" she shouted, her voice raspy, barely able to speak. "What did you do?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, Karen? You mean the vegetables you stole?" "Oh, those were a special breed I was testing. Extra spicy," she sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at me. You poisoned me." I laughed. "I couldn't help it." "Poisoned you? Karen, it's just a pepper. Maybe next time, you should ask before stealing from my farm." Her face contorted with rage, but she couldn't argue. She had been caught red-handed. The only thing she could do now was storm off, which she did, muttering threats about lawsuits and calling the police. I wasn't worried. I had the footage. If anything, I was the one with legal leverage. As she disappeared back into her house, still fanning her mouth, I turned back to my farm, feeling a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in a long time. This was only the beginning. Karen wasn't the type to back down without a fight, but neither was I. And if she wanted a war, she was going to get one. The morning after Karen's ghost pepper meltdown was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. I sat on my porch, sipping my coffee, watching her front yard like a hawk. She hadn't shown her face yet, and I could only assume she was still recovering from the fiery inferno she had unknowingly unleashed upon herself. Part of me expected her to march over, screaming at me, demanding revenge. But the hours passed, and the neighborhood remained calm. Maybe she had finally learned her lesson. Maybe she realized that stealing wasn't worth the risk. I should have known better. By the time the afternoon rolled around, I noticed something strange. Cars were pulling up to Karen's driveway, and people were getting out, carrying trays and dishes covered in foil. Curious, I leaned forward, squinting to see what was going on. It didn't take long for me to realize what she was up to. A potluck. She was throwing a neighborhood potluck. And judging by the number of people showing up, she had gone all out with the invitations. I chuckled to myself. She was really trying to put on a show, pretending that everything was fine, acting like she hadn't spent the previous night rolling around in agony because of the peppers she stole. But then something dawned on me, something that made me sit up a little straighter. She was serving food. Panic crept in as I realized what that meant. The stolen vegetables. The ghost peppers. Had she used them in her cooking? Surely, she wasn't that careless. Surely, after experiencing the burn firsthand, she wouldn't risk inflicting that pain on an entire gathering of unsuspecting guests. Or would she? I grabbed my binoculars from inside and peered across the street. Karen was standing in the center of her backyard, smiling, laughing, playing the perfect hostess. On a long table behind her, there were several dishes, a massive salad, a big pot of what looked like pasta, and a tray of salsa. My stomach dropped. All of those dishes could easily contain my ghost peppers, and none of the guests had any idea. I had to see how this played out. Slipping on my boots, I made my way across the street, keeping my face neutral as I approached the party. Karen saw me coming, her eyes narrowing, her lips curling into a smug smile. She had to be furious with me, but instead of attacking, she played it cool. Well, she said, placing a hand on her hip. "Look who decided to crash the party." I smiled, pretending I wasn't completely focused on the food. Just came to see what all the excitement was about. Karen smirked, lifting a glass of lemonade to her lips. It's a celebration. A little thank you gathering for my wonderful neighbors. You should try some of the food. I made it myself. I glanced at the table, my pulse quickening. Either she had removed the peppers after last night's disaster, or she was about to ruin her own party in the most spectacular way possible. I wasn't sure which possibility entertained me more. As the guests started serving themselves, I took a step back, watching closely. A group of older women spooned generous portions of salad onto their plates. A father loaded up on the pasta, piling it high. A kid reached for a tortilla chip and scooped up a large helping of salsa. My heart pounded. This was it. The first scream came from the salad table. An elderly woman, dressed in a floral blouse, took a bite and immediately grabbed her throat. Her face turned